The grand chamber of the Galactic Council sparkled like a jewel hanging in space. Its crystal walls reflected the light of 3 suns, creating rainbow patterns across the gathered ambassadors from 1,000 worlds. Among them sat Tom Reed, the human representative, his broad shoulders and solid frame marking him as different from the others. Tom watched quietly as the thin, tall aliens around him discussed trade routes and resource sharing. He had spent 6 months here as Earth's ambassador, learning their ways. Most species in the Council came from gentle worlds with perfect weather and soft breezes. They had never known storms, earthquakes, or the harsh changes of seasons that Earth threw at its children. The head counselor, Leader Gray, stood at the center platform. His silver skin gleamed as he spoke in the common tongue. Now we must discuss the human expansion request. Earth seeks permission to colonize 3 new worlds in the Orion sector. A murmur spread through the chamber. Tom straightened in his seat, ready for the fight he knew was coming. Objection. The voice came from Ambassador White, one of the elder race leaders. His long neck stretched forward as he pointed a delicate finger at Tom. We cannot allow Deathworlders to spread so quickly. Their very presence threatens the balance of our peaceful society. Tom's jaw tightened, but he kept his face calm. He had learned that showing anger only made them more nervous. Look at their history, White continued, bringing up images of Earth's past wars and conflicts. They fight among themselves. They eat meat. They have bones dense enough to break our strongest materials. How can we trust them with more worlds? Other ambassadors nodded in agreement. Tom noticed fear in their eyes. Fear of things they didn't understand. To them, humans were monsters who had somehow learned to wear suits and speak politely. Leader Gray raised his hand for silence. The Council recognizes Earth's right to petition for expansion. However, given the concerns raised, perhaps we should delay this request for another century or 2. Give them time to evolve beyond their primitive nature. That was the last straw. Tom stood up, his chair scraping against the floor. The sound made several ambassadors jump. Point of order, he said clearly, his voice carrying across the chamber. The human wishes to speak, Leader Gray announced, though Tom could hear the dismissal in his tone. I invoke the right of physical challenge under Article 7 of the ancient laws, Tom declared. The chamber erupted in chaos. Ambassadors jumped from their seats, their voices mixing in different languages. Some of the younger races looked confused, while the elder ones showed pure shock. Leader Gray's silver skin turned almost white. That law has not been invoked in 10,000 years. But it still stands, Tom replied calmly. Any race whose capabilities are questioned may prove themselves through the trials. Or are the ancient laws no longer valid? The elder council members huddled together, speaking in hurried whispers. They couldn't deny the law without undermining their own authority, but they had never expected anyone to actually use it. Finally, Leader Gray turned back to Tom. You understand what you're asking. The trials are designed to test the limits of any species. They have caused deaths in the past. Tom smiled, showing just a hint of teeth. We humans come from a world that tries to kill us every day. We've survived ice ages, plagues, and disasters. We've lived through floods and droughts. We've adapted to every challenge our world has thrown at us. He paused, looking around the chamber. The question isn't whether I'll survive your trials. The question is, are you ready to learn what a Deathworlder can really do? A heavy silence fell over the chamber. In that moment, looking at the human standing tall and confident, some of the younger ambassadors began to wonder if they had underestimated these newcomers from Earth. Leader Gray's voice shook slightly as he spoke the formal words. The challenge is accepted. The trials will begin in 3 days. May the stars witness your choice. Tom nodded and sat back down, hiding his satisfaction. They had called humans primitive, violent, and dangerous. Now he would show them that surviving the Deathworld hadn't made humans monsters. It had made them strong enough to protect others. The first move had been made. The real challenge was about to begin. Tom stood in his quarters aboard the council station, looking out at the stars. A message screen floated in front of him, showing the details of the trials he would face. His room felt cold. The station's temperature was set for the comfort of most alien species, who preferred things cooler than humans did. The trials will test your survival abilities in 4 different environments, the computer's voice explained. No species has attempted these challenges in over 10,000 years. The death rate in previous attempts was 60%. Tom smiled as he read through the list. Acid plains, crushing depths, extreme heat, combat trials. To the council races, these were horrifying challenges. To someone who grew up on Earth, they were Tuesday. A soft chime announced a visitor. The door slid open to reveal Ambassador Black, one of the few council members who had been friendly to humans. His insect-like features twisted in what Tom had learned was concern. "You must withdraw the challenge," Black said, his antennae twitching. "The betting pools are against you. The elder races have set the trials to their most difficult settings. They want to make an example of you." "How much are they betting against me?" Tom asked, curious. 100 to 1 odds against human survival. Black's compound eyes reflected the starlight. "They're calling you suicidal." Tom walked to a small box on his desk and pulled out something that made Black step back, an old compass made of metal and glass. "See this? It belonged to my grandfather. He was a survival instructor." He sat down, turning the compass in his hands. "When I was 12, he took me into the Rocky Mountains. We had minimal gear, just like these trials. On the second day, a storm hit. The temperature dropped below freezing. We had to dig a snow cave to survive." Black's antennae drooped. "That sounds terrible." "It was the best week of my life," Tom said, smiling at the memory. "My grandfather taught me that humans didn't become strong by avoiding challenges. We got strong by facing them." The computer chimed again, displaying new information. "Warning. Medical scans show the human representative lacks the standard genetic modifications required for space travel. Enhanced radiation resistance, bone density adjusters, and temperature regulators are missing. They think we modified ourselves to survive space." Tom laughed. "We just built better ships instead." He walked to a cabinet and pulled out a small pack, starting to gather supplies. The rules allowed him basic survival gear. Nothing powered or technological. He chose carefully: a knife, some rope, water containers, and basic medical supplies. "What are you doing?" Black asked. "The trials don't start for 2 days. On Earth, we have a saying: the more you sweat in training, the less you bleed in battle." Tom began doing push-ups, his muscles already adapting to the station's lighter gravity. "I need to prepare." As he exercised, memories flashed through his mind. Learning to swim in rough ocean waves, rock climbing without gear, running for miles in the desert heat. His grandfather's voice echoed in his head. "The environment isn't your enemy. It's your teacher." A new alert flashed on the screen. The betting odds had changed. Now 200 to 1 against him. The council races were getting more confident in their victory. Black watched Tom continue his exercises. "I don't understand. You seem happy about all this." Tom stood up, wiping sweat from his forehead. "The council thinks they're going to prove humans are dangerous primitives, but they've forgotten something important." "What's that?" "Earth is classified as a death world because 90% of its species are deadly to sentient life." Tom's eyes gleamed. "But that also means every human who survives to adulthood has already passed trials harder than anything the council can design." He picked up his grandfather's compass again, watching the needle spin and settle. "They think they're testing our limits, but really they're about to learn why humans are the only species whose babies learn to walk by falling down again and again and getting back up every time." Black's antennae twitched in surprise. "Your young learn by failing." "No," Tom corrected him. "We learn by never giving up. And in 2 days, the council is going to learn what that really means." As Black left, Tom returned to his exercises. "Tomorrow, He would rest. The day after, he would show the galaxy why humans were called Deathworlders. Not because they were monsters, but because they had learned to dance with death and smile while doing it. The transport ship landed on planet Karis with a soft hiss. Through the viewport, Tom could see an endless plain of gray rock stretching to the horizon. Green clouds rolled overhead, heavy with acid rain. The council members watching from their protected observation dome looked nervous. They had never seen anyone face this trial with so little protection. Final warning, the computer announced. The atmospheric acid concentration is level 3. Standard safety protocols require full environmental suits. Tom looked down at his simple gear: thick boots, regular clothes treated with water-resistant coating, and a small breathing mask. The council races had given him access to their best protective suits, but he had refused. He needed to make a point. Beginning trial in 10 seconds, the computer continued. Survival requirement: cross the acid plains. Distance: 5 kilometers. Time limit: 2 hours. The ship's door opened. Immediately, the acid rain began falling, creating a curtain of green droplets. The council members watched in horror as Tom stepped out with minimal protection. The first drops hit his skin. They stung, but Tom smiled. The acid was weaker than lemon juice. Is the human trying to die? One council member asked through the public communication channel. His skin will dissolve. Tom began walking, deliberately keeping a steady pace. Fun fact about humans, he said into his communicator. Our skin is actually quite good at handling acid. We eat things more acidic than this rain every day. Ever heard of earth oranges? The acid rain fell harder. Other contestants in the past had worn sealed suits, crawling from shelter to shelter. Tom walked straight through the open plains, letting the rain hit him. His skin reddened but didn't burn. Years of evolution on Earth, handling everything from poison ivy to snake venom, had made human skin remarkably resistant. Halfway across the plain, Tom encountered the first obstacle: a wide stream of concentrated acid. The sensors showed it was strong enough to dissolve metal. Past challengers had spent hours building bridges or finding ways around it. Tom studied the stream for a moment, then did something that made the council observers gasp. He pulled off his shirt and dipped it in the regular acid rain. Human skin is waterproof, he explained as he worked, wringing out his shirt and repeating the process. We're basically wearing a natural acid-resistant suit, but our clothes can absorb protective chemicals. He wrapped the acid-soaked shirt around his boots, creating an extra layer of protection. The weaker acid would act as a buffer against the stronger acid in the stream. Then, before anyone could stop him, he ran straight through the stream. The concentrated acid splashed around his legs. His treated boots and acid-soaked shirt took the worst of it. He emerged on the other side with steam rising from his feet, but otherwise unharmed. Impossible, shouted one of the elder race observers. The acid should have dissolved his leg bones. Tom kept walking as he replied. Human bones are strengthened by calcium. You know what else has calcium? Eggshells. Try putting an egg in vinegar. The shell dissolves. But unlike eggshells, our bones are alive. They constantly rebuild themselves. The green clouds grew darker, and the acid rain turned into a storm. Tom didn't break his stride. His skin was red and irritated, but the acid barely bothered him now. Human skin adapted quickly, producing extra oils and hardening against repeated exposure. As he approached the finish line, Tom saw something that made him laugh. The betting odds on the observation screen had dropped from 200 to 1 to 20 to 1. The council races were finally starting to understand. Tom crossed the finish line with 40 minutes to spare. His clothes were partly dissolved. His skin was red, but he was grinning. As medical teams rushed to check him, he looked up at the observation dome. You know what humans call a light acid rain like this back on Earth? He asked. We call it acid rain, and we lived with it through our industrial age. Compared to what we did to our own world, this is nothing. In the observation dome, Ambassador Black's antennae twitched with amusement as the other council members sat in shocked silence. They had just watched a primitive human walk through acid that would have dissolved their strongest metals. Perhaps, Black suggested quietly, we should reconsider our definition of advanced species. Tom was already looking forward to the next trial. If they thought acid was impressive, wait until they saw what humans could do under pressure. The transport pod descended through the dark waters of Planet Frost's global ocean. Tom watched through the window as ice floated above them, blocking out most of the planet's weak sunlight. The depth meter kept ticking. 100 meters, 200 meters, 300 meters. The second trial will test your resistance to extreme pressure, the computer announced. You must retrieve a marker from the ocean floor at 500 meters and return to the surface. Previous candidates used pressure suits. Would you like one? No, Tom said, checking his simple diving gear. He had only asked for a basic mask, air tank, and flippers. Humans have been free diving deeper than this for centuries. The council members, watching from their pressurized observation vessel, started chattering in disbelief. His bones will crack. The pressure will crush his lungs. Even our strongest deep-sea species use protection at these depths. Tom smiled as he remembered his training days. His grandfather had taught him free diving in the Pacific Ocean. The sea isn't your enemy, he had said. It's just asking you to adapt. The pod stopped at 400 meters. Through the dark water, Tom could see the marker glowing faintly on the seafloor, another 100 meters down. The water temperature was just above freezing. Beginning trial, the computer announced. Time limit, 30 minutes. Tom took several deep breaths, preparing his body. He had learned this technique from pearl divers in Earth's oceans. As he breathed, his heart rate slowed. Many species needed machines to adjust their bodies to pressure changes. Humans just needed practice. The pod's hatch opened. Ice-cold water rushed in. Several council members made sounds of distress as they watched Tom's skin react to the cold, turning red, then pale, as his blood vessels contracted to preserve heat. Tom pushed off into the dark water. The pressure squeezed his body. But he had expected this. Human bodies were remarkably good at handling pressure changes. They did it every time they went swimming or hiking in mountains. Amazing, Ambassador Black commented. His body is adapting to the pressure naturally. No signs of distress. As Tom swam deeper, he remembered something he had learned about the council races. Most of them evolved on worlds with very stable conditions. They never had to deal with changing pressures or temperatures. Humans, on the other hand, had to handle massive pressure changes just by walking up and down hills. The marker glowed brighter as he approached the bottom. The pressure was intense now, like being squeezed by a giant hand. But Tom's body kept adjusting. His lungs compressed safely, his flexible ribcage adapted, and his blood vessels regulated pressure throughout his body. He reached the marker at 500 meters. As he grabbed it, the observation vessel's lights illuminated something in the darkness, a large, serpentine shape moving toward him. Warning, the computer blared. Native predator detected. The council members watched in terror as a huge eel-like creature emerged from the darkness. It was clearly attracted to Tom's movement. In the past, candidates had either frozen in fear or rushed to the surface, risking decompression sickness. Tom did neither. He turned to face the creature, making himself appear larger, a predator's instinct that humans had never lost. The eel creature hesitated, not used to prey that stood its ground. Remarkable, Ambassador Black observed. He's showing no fear response. Look at his heart rate. It's elevated but controlled. Tom began his ascent, keeping his movements smooth and controlled. The eel creature followed at a distance, confused by this strange being that acted like a predator. He stopped at regular intervals, letting his body adjust to the changing pressure. This was another human advantage. They could plan ahead, thinking clearly even in dangerous situations. When Tom finally surfaced, the betting odds had dropped again. Now they were only 5-1 against him. The council races were learning that human adaptability wasn't just about technology. It was built into their very bodies. In the observation vessel, an elder council member turned to Ambassador Black. How is this possible? They have no pressure regulation genes, no temperature control implants. No, Black replied. They have something better. They have adaptation. Their bodies learn and change. Every human is a collection of millions of years of surviving challenges just like this. Tom climbed back into the transport pod, already thinking about the next trial. The council had tried to crush him with pressure, but they didn't understand. Humans were like diamonds. Pressure didn't break them. It made them stronger. The red sun of planet Scorch burned in the sky like an angry eye. Tom stood at the starting point of his third trial, feeling the intense heat on his skin. The temperature display showed 45 degrees Celsius, 113 Fahrenheit, and it would get much hotter. The heat trial requires crossing the desert basin. The computer explained. Distance, 10 kilometers. Temperature will rise to 55 degrees Celsius at midday. All previous survivors used thermal regulation suits. In their observation shelter, the council members watched through heat-resistant windows. They were dressed in cooling suits, yet still looked uncomfortable. Candidate, Leader Gray's voice came through the communicator. You can't seriously plan to cross without a thermal suit. Even our desert-evolved species use protection here. Tom took a drink from his water bottle and poured some over his head. You know what humans call 55 degrees Celsius. We call it Death Valley in summer, and people visit there for fun. He began walking, keeping a steady pace. Sweat already covered his skin, but that was the point. While other species needed technology to cool down, humans had a built-in cooling system. Fascinating, Ambassador Black observed. His body is releasing water to cool itself naturally. Most species would consider this a waste of precious fluids. Tom smiled as he walked. Want to know something interesting about humans? We evolved as persistence hunters. We would chase prey until they collapsed from heat exhaustion. Most animals can run faster than us, but none can run longer in the heat. The sun climbed higher, and the temperature rose. Tom's clothes were soaked with sweat, but he kept moving. He had learned this pace from desert tribes on Earth, steady, relentless, conserving energy while covering ground. At the halfway point, the temperature hit 50 degrees. The ground shimmered with heat waves. Other species would have been cooking inside their own bodies, but Tom's sweat kept him at a safe temperature. His core temperature is stable, one of the medical observers noted with surprise. The water evaporating from his skin is creating a natural cooling effect. Then came the real challenge. A dust storm appeared on the horizon, bringing even hotter air. Past challengers had taken shelter, waiting out the storm in protective pods scattered across the desert. Tom didn't stop. He pulled a cloth over his nose and mouth and kept walking. The hot wind threw sand against his skin, but he had experienced worse in Earth's deserts. This is suicide, Leader Gray exclaimed. The sand will strip his skin away. But Tom had another surprise for them. The sweat on his skin had created a protective layer of salt. Combined with the natural oils in human skin, it helped protect him from the sand. It wasn't comfortable, but it was survivable. As he walked through the storm, Tom remembered something his grandfather told him. Humans don't have to be the strongest or fastest. We just have to be the ones who don't give up. The storm passed, but the heat grew worse. 53 degrees, 54 degrees, 55 degrees. Tom's pace never changed. His body was working exactly as millions of years of evolution had designed it to. Sweating, cooling, adapting. When he finally reached the finish line, even the medical team seemed afraid to approach him. They had never seen a species survive such heat without protection. How? Leader Gray demanded. Your planet has cold regions. You should not be able to handle this heat. Tom accepted a fresh water bottle before answering. Humans evolved in Africa, on hot savannas. We learned to handle cold later. But the heat, that's where we started. We're one of the few species that can sweat all over our bodies. We're built for this. The betting odds had dropped again. Now they were even. The council races were finally understanding what they were dealing with. In the observation room, Ambassador Black turned to the others. Do you see now? While we built technology to survive, they built themselves. Every human carries the legacy of countless ancestors who survived heat, cold, flood, and storm. Tom looked toward the setting sun, already thinking about the final trial. The council had tried to break him with acid, pressure, and heat. Now came the part he was really looking forward to: combat. It was time to show them why humans weren't just survivors. They were predators who had chosen to become peacekeepers. The ancient arena hadn't seen combat in 10,000 years. Its stone walls rose high into the purple sky, filled now with council members from 100 worlds. The betting odds were even. The first time in history a challenger had come this far. Tom stood in the preparation chamber, wrapping his hands with cloth strips. He had refused the modern combat suits and energy weapons offered to him. All he asked for were hand wraps and lightweight clothes. Final trial protocols, the computer announced. Combat challenge against the council's chosen champion. Victory by submission or incapacitation. Lethal force is not permitted. The doors opened, and Tom walked into the arena. Across the sand, another door opened. The council's champion emerged. Ambassador White himself, wearing the latest combat enhancement suit. The silvery material covered him from neck to toe, gleaming with power circuits. I will prove humans are too dangerous to join us, White announced through his suit's speakers. His thin frame had been enhanced by the suit's strength systems. You're nothing but primitives who learn to talk. Tom smiled, settling into a relaxed stance. You know what makes humans different from most predator species? We don't just chase, we plan. White charged, his suit letting him move at incredible speed. His first punch could have shattered concrete. But Tom wasn't there anymore. He had stepped aside, letting White's momentum carry him past. Impossible. White spun around. The suit's targeting system should have predicted your move. That's your first mistake, Tom said, still smiling. You rely on machines to predict what living beings will do. The next exchange was faster. White's suit let him throw dozens of punches per second. Tom blocked or dodged each one, his movements efficient and practiced. He wasn't faster than the suit, but he didn't need to be. He was reading White's body language, predicting his moves before the suit's computers could calculate them. Remarkable. Ambassador Black commented from the observation booth. The human is using the champion's enhanced strength against him. Every missed strike drains the suit's energy. White's attacks grew stronger but wilder. The suit was powerful, but it couldn't match human instincts developed through millions of years of evolution. Tom moved like water, never where the attacks aimed, always in position to counter. Fight back, primitive, White shouted in frustration. I am fighting, Tom replied calmly. I'm just fighting smart, like my ancestors did when they faced bigger, stronger animals. Suddenly, Tom changed his pattern. Instead of dodging, he stepped into White's attack. His palm struck White's chest, not hard enough to harm, but in exactly the right place to disrupt the suit's balance sensors. White stumbled. The suit's computers tried to compensate, but they were designed to enhance natural movement, not correct it. Before they could adjust, Tom swept White's legs out from under him. The champion crashed to the ground. Tom followed, applying a simple joint lock that no computer could counter because it used the suit's own strength against it. The more White struggled, the more the suit worked against him. Yield, Tom said quietly. Your suit is at 200% power, fighting itself. In about 10 seconds, it's going to overload. White's eyes widened as he saw the warning lights flashing. I yield. The arena fell silent. Tom helped White up, then turned to address the council. You thought humans were primitive because we don't rely on enhancement suits or genetic engineering," he said, his voice carrying to every corner of the arena. "But that's our strength. We adapt. We learn. Every human child learns to walk by falling down and getting up again. We don't just overcome our limits, we turn them into advantages." He looked at Leader Gray. "You called Earth a death world. You're right. But that's not a warning label. It's a graduation certificate. We survived everything our world could throw at us, not by hiding behind technology, but by becoming better." In the stands, the council members were silent. They had watched a human defeat their best technology with nothing but skill and understanding. The betting odds displayed above the arena flashed and changed one final time. Now they showed heavy odds in favor of humanity's success. Ambassador Black stepped forward. "The trials are complete. The council must now vote on humanity's status. But first, I have a question." He looked at Tom. "Will humans teach others what you've shown us here?" Tom smiled. "That's why we're here. Not to prove we're stronger, but to show that anyone can learn to be stronger. Earth taught us that. Now we want to share those lessons." The final trial was over. Now came the real challenge, teaching the galaxy that true strength wasn't about technology or evolution. It was about never stopping learning, never stopping growing, and never giving up. The Grand Council chamber looked different now. Where once the other species had kept their distance from Tom, now they leaned forward with interest. The three suns outside cast rainbow patterns through the crystal walls, but all eyes were on the human standing in the center. Leader Gray's silver skin shimmered as he stood to make the announcement. In 10,000 years, no species has completed all 4 trials. Yet a human did it with minimal technology. The council must now vote on humanity's status. The chamber's great screens lit up, showing recordings from each trial. Tom watched himself walking through acid rain, diving in crushing depths, crossing the burning desert, and defeating their champion. Each image told the same story. Humans didn't just survive challenges, they adapted to them. "Before we vote," Ambassador White spoke up, his combat suit replaced with regular robes, "I wish to address the council." He turned to face Tom. "I called humans primitives. I was wrong. What looks like primitive strength is actually something far more valuable: the ability to learn from every challenge." Ambassador Black's antennae twitched with amusement. "Perhaps that is why humans tell stories of failure to their young, while we only teach of success. They understand that falling down is part of learning to stand up." The voting began. Each species had 1 vote. The screens above showed the numbers climbing. Tom stood quietly, remembering everything that had led to this moment. Not just his trials, but all of human history. Every human who had ever looked at an impossible challenge and found a way forward had helped bring him here. Finally, Leader Gray rose again. "The vote is complete. By an overwhelming majority, the Council recognizes humanity not just as full members, but as a Guardian-class species." Excited whispers filled the chamber. Guardian status was rare, reserved for species who could help protect and teach others. Furthermore, Leader Gray continued, "We approve not just 3 colony worlds, but 10, with a condition." He looked at Tom. "You will establish training centers on each world, teaching other species the survival skills humans have developed." Tom nodded. "We would be honored, but I have a condition too." The chamber went quiet. No one had ever added conditions to a council ruling. "The term Deathworlder should be retired," Tom said. "Earth isn't a death world. It's a teaching world. Every challenge it gave us made us better. Every species here has that same potential. They just need to learn how to embrace challenges instead of avoiding them." Leader Gray's eyes widened. "You wish to teach other species to become like humans?" "No," Tom smiled. "We want to teach them to become better versions of themselves. Humans aren't special because we're stronger or tougher. We're special because we never stop learning, never stop adapting." Ambassador Black stepped forward. "I support this proposal. Let us rename such planets crucible worlds, places where strength is forged through challenge. The council voted again. The measure passed unanimously. As the session ended, species that had once avoided Tom now crowded around him. They had questions about human training methods, about how to start learning without genetic engineering or technological aids. Start small, Tom told them. Humans didn't begin by walking through acid rain. We started by falling down as babies and getting back up. Every time we got up, we got a little stronger, a little smarter. Ambassador White joined them, looking humble. Will you teach me some of those combat moves? Without the suit this time. Better, Tom replied. I'll teach you why they work. Understanding is more important than technique. As the chamber slowly emptied, Ambassador Black approached Tom one last time. You knew, didn't you? From the moment you challenged us, you knew this wasn't really about proving human strength. Tom nodded. Earth taught us something important. Real strength isn't about being the toughest. It's about helping others become tougher. Every challenge we faced made us better teachers. Outside the chamber's windows, the three suns were setting, painting the sky in brilliant colors. Somewhere out there, Earth was waiting. The cradle of humanity, once labeled a deathworld, was now recognized as something far more important. A school for those who wanted to learn how to turn challenges into strength. The day a Deathworlder challenged the Galactic Council had become the day the galaxy learned that true power wasn't in avoiding difficulties, but in learning from them. And that was a lesson humanity was ready to teach.